Hello, and thank you so much for being here with us today. This is the 6th annual Disrupting the System from Lazarex Cancer Foundation, and we are so excited to have you all here. Sponsored by Metadata. Yes, woohoo. We are so happy to have an in-person audience here in the nation's capital for the first time since 2019. I'm Laura Evans-Manitas, President and CEO of Laura Evans Media. And for those who couldn't make it to DC, here in the Gold Room at the Rayburn Building, we are broadcasting live from Capitol Hill. We are so happy to have those who are joining our live stream today. So thank you to all of you for joining with us today. And we invite every one of you here in the room and those joining virtually to post on social media, because we all know how important that is these days, to post about what you're hearing today. If you find it interesting and compelling, please post about it. When you do, use the hashtag LazarexDTS. Please take a look at the screen right here, and you can use, and also tag Metadata and tag Lazarex using the handles that you see there on the screen. We do hope that you will share so that others can learn about today's important discussions. Huge thanks to the sponsors who have made today possible: Women's Cancer Resource Center, Be the Difference Foundation, and Georgia Core. And again, thanks to Metadata. Since 2006, Lazarex Cancer Foundation has been working from the ground up to clear the obstacles to cancer clinical trials. Why? Because as Lazarex founder Dana Dornsife likes to say, we are tired of hearing people talking. At Lazarex, we do the doing. And there has been a lot of doing over the years. So here to tell us a little bit about that journey and what Lazarex is all about, please welcome Lazarex CEO, Stephanie Rivera.
Thank you, Laura. It is truly an honor to serve as CEO of the only nonprofit in the country working to create equitable access by helping patients with the travel costs to get to their clinical trials. More than 16 years ago, Dana Dornsife and her sisters Erin and Karen realized the financial challenges patients face accessing clinical trials when Erin's beloved husband, Mike, was diagnosed with cancer and realized this challenge himself. That led them to ask a simple but provocative question: how does a patient get to a potentially life-saving clinical trial if they can't afford to get there? The reality is that a majority of cancer patients don't participate in clinical trials because they can't cover these costs quickly, and the mounting costs just continue to grow. Lazarex has since helped more than 10,000 patients. 10,000 patients, everyone. Access cancer clinical trials. But reimbursements were just the beginning. In doing the work, we have uncovered many more obstacles to patient care, and we are committed to chipping away at them. From convincing the FDA to change their guidance language to allow reimbursement for travel to clinical trial sites, to legislation in 7 states calling for reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses, partnerships that open doors to care for low-income patients, to boots on the ground, community engagement, and underserved communities. We are disrupting the system by laying the groundwork for meaningful change, and we are just getting started. This event is a critical part of that work to collectively push the envelope further. And this work has long been my passion. And this year, it also became personal for me. I was diagnosed with stage 4 thyroid cancer that had metastasized. I have to tell you that the hospital gown is a great equalizer. And as a patient, I experienced firsthand how easy it is to lose your own voice in the maze of the healthcare system and feel more like a statistic than a person. I finished my treatment. I am cancer-free. And I am now more committed than ever to support the incredible VIPs, our very important patients that we work with at Lazarex. And we really enjoy having them with us. So, let's get started. Dana Dornsife, our Lazarex founder and Chief Mission and Strategy Officer. She kicks off tonight's program with our special guest. So I'm glad to introduce Dana.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. A productive process is a critical part of successfully disrupting the system. And we've seen time and again how important Congress is in driving change at the federal and state level. In 2018, we were advocating for the FDA to change guidance to confirm that travel reimbursements aren't coercion, but a way to make trials more equitable. Once we got Congress in alignment with the help of Dr. John White, the FDA's Director, Professional Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement, the FDA delivered new guidance within 8 months. This event is all about having provocative and courageous conversations on important issues that are hard to get people to talk about, and lawmakers are an integral part of spurring change with policy and legislation. So last year, we started a new tradition at Disrupting the System, an intimate sit-down chat with disruptors and change makers to focus on honest discussions about practical, positive, and actionable ways to address barriers and remove them. Today, we're joined by 3 members of Congress who've been incredible partners to us in the fight for equity and access. Welcome to Congresswoman Robin Kelly of Illinois. Congressman Buddy Carter of Georgia. And Congressman Pete Sessions of Texas. We're focusing our discussion on the process, and health insurance is an example. It helps a lot of people, and insurance companies are a very successful business, but they're also creating barriers and inequities, and patients are paying for that with their health and sometimes with their lives. So I'm going to sit down with our panel, and I'm going to take off my name tag and see I followed directions well, and we're going to have a little chat. All right, well, thank you all for joining us today, and it's really refreshing to have the opportunity to engage with you in this type of just simple, transparent conversation, and invite the public in to share your thoughts. And so the first question that I have is that the better we all understand your legislative policy and process, the more likely we are to succeed in our attempts to drive change. So where do we begin, and how do we move forward in a positive way? And I wanted to ask this question because I've spent many years now with the help of lots of folks here on the Hill, and we've been able to actually make some tremendous headway. And a lot of people come to me and say, well, you know, I'm just going to write a letter and I'm going to tell my congressman everything that they're doing wrong. And I said, well, that's great, but that's not very helpful, right? Because we also have to come with solutions and recommendations and help you really understand the issues at hand from, you know, a personal perspective. So again, the question is, where do we begin, and how do we move forward in a positive way? And I'm just going to open it up to the panel. You can just...
Well, the first thing I want to say is I know how people look at us from the outside, and hopefully my colleagues will agree that we get along much better than people think we do. And we do work together more on energy and commerce. We have a lot of bipartisan bills, so I want people to know that from the beginning. And I mean, for me, I love when people or groups come to see me that are working on certain items, because we have to be focused on so many things, and you're focused on that thing, and we don't have all the ideas. Maybe some of us think we do, but we don't. And so I like to hear what the issue has been and what your suggestions are to make things better. And I have a great staff, and I do have a health policy person on my staff who you met, but so we work together to try to see how we can solve problems.
Great. And Representative Carter.
Well, first of all, thank y'all for being here, and thank you for participating in this. This is extremely important. These are the types of grassroots efforts, if you will, that make a difference. They do make a difference in Congress. So you get attention when you come up here, and you bring attention to a much-needed subject. I would echo my colleagues' comments about the Energy and Commerce Committee. Both of us serve on that committee. It is I've always said it's the most bipartisan committee in Congress, and I believe it is. It's a very diverse committee. We handle a lot of things, as you can imagine, energy and commerce, but the reason that I really wanted to be on it, the main reason, is because that's what a healthcare subcommittee is. And as a pharmacist, that's where I wanted to be, and probably where I should be, as you would suspect. You know, when it comes to healthcare, and we look at you look at it from a bipartisan fashion, we all want the same thing. We want accessible, affordable, quality healthcare. Now, we may differ on how we get there sometimes, but we still have the same common goals: accessible, affordable, quality healthcare. And that's what we try to work toward, and certainly this is an important part of it. You know, treating patients, cancer patients, or whatever it may be that we're dealing with at that time, it's certainly important that we do it in a bipartisan fashion, and we do it where it's going to benefit all Americans, and it's going to benefit us toward our same common goal of, again, and not to be repetitive, but to have accessible, affordable, quality health care.
Thank you. And Representative Sessions, I'd like you to answer the question in a moment, but I do just want to say how grateful Lazarex Cancer Foundation is for your assistance in helping us back in, 2014, 2015, 2016, and on, right? And getting a bipartisan group of congressmen and women to understand the issues around out-of-pocket travel expense as a barrier to clinical trials, and going to the FDA and working with the FDA to really get the changes made, and to get the guidance language that we needed in order to be able to permissibly reimburse patients, and to have pharma support the effort, and they are. And so I'd like to say that was kind of my first taste of really working with Congress in a really give and take fashion. And you really helped us on the education tour and putting all that together. It's life.
Dana, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it from a different perspective, because I don't sit on the Energy and Commerce Committee, but I've been a member for 25 years. And I have 13 fraternity brothers that are medical doctors, very close at the time I went to school with them, and they schooled me early on in not just the art and practice of medicine, but really what the landscape looked like with insurance, with trial lawyers, with a number of facts and factors, including policy, which is where all of a sudden I fit in. I had an opinion about some things, but I look at it from a perspective that we have the greatest healthcare system in the world. It may be also one of the most expensive in the world, but that's because, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we don't have today that Europe has. They've got their own system. They've moved things out. Other countries do things differently. I tend to look at how do we get to where we have excellence in healthcare? Where do we have centers of excellence? How do we make sure that we go and travel from whether it be a cancer, certain types of cancers, or whether we're trying to get problems with retinas. How do we develop a system that can, I've got a guy that just won't leave me alone. and it didn't just start in the last 5 minutes. And what I would say to you is that we're a very big country, and we have a lot of things which we would wish to become better at. See, if he didn't get one phone, he goes the other. And so paying for these healthcare systems and doctors and equipment and ideas and centers of excellence has been a daunting task for us. So we tended to err on the side of R&D, research and development, to find out what was the best way to approach a heart, a liver, a lung, whatever it might be, a Down syndrome child, which I have. We try and develop centers of excellence, but just like everything else in this country, you can have the greatest product in 3 years, it's going to be obsolete. And there are things that we learn and data that we take in and new procedures and things that we learn. And so we find ourselves on the backside of the curve a lot. But we also find ourselves on the backside of people who live in rural areas or non-metropolitan areas might live on the backside of a curve also. We've gotten pretty good at certain things, but we tend to put money and do innovation, like where we give the military a lot of money. We want them to go and be leading edge. So why do you rob banks? There's money there. Why do you go and get the DOD budget? Because there's money in there. And it tends to be a way that we can do things. Okay, Dana's asking the leading edge questions. How do we make everybody first place? How does everybody get everything? How does everybody stand a chance at everything? And the answer is, we're trying to run a company whereby we try and place a huge value off human life and our ability to make their life better. And the bottom line is our bodies are just complex. And so beginning years ago when I came into Congress, we got into this genome project and to learn about things. And we are really now putting together a lot of things that we had not before. And so Dana has this idea because of a family relationship. We've got to get people in, no matter where they live in this country, whether they were Indians and live in Oklahoma or whether they live somewhere else. We've got to understand enough about how we will treat the various cancers and the various diseases that they have. And I would just say to you, Dana, you're doing such a great job, but ideas get ahead of our abilities. So we are now learning, and I think Dana, last night in a conversation we had, we're trying to learn about how best to look at giving everybody that chance to be a part of a trial, to be a part of learning about them, and then putting that together. And this is this complex methodology. So how do you give everybody coverage? Let me tell you what, we learned Obamacare. Obamacare, a child could not even go to a children's hospital under Obamacare for coverage. No children's hospital would take Obamacare. If you have cancer under Obamacare, you got an oncologist, not a specialist. And the way we've made advances in cancer is specialties in oncology, where they were learning how to do things better. So we're a long way away. So how do we get to where we include everybody in trials? How do we get more people in trials? How do we learn more about this? How do we bring AI to bear? And how do we do this? We've got to do better. So I think there are some ideas that are out there, but, you know, you can be born in Clovis, New Mexico and have 8 children, 8 babies, and every one of them are $1 million baby, and there will be coverage. We have safety nets for things like that, but we don't always have safety nets for everybody to go to a center of excellence, and we can't always take someone there, and that's Dana's goal, and so we got a long way to go.
All right,
So,
well, let me tell you,
I didn't help you, but I put some into some.
We're going to help you figure it out.
Okay.
So Representative Carter, Georgia just became the 7th state to pass legislation reinforcing the FDA guidance that travel reimbursement for trials drives equity and isn't coercion. The bill made it through the legislative process very quickly, in about 1 month. And your state has a real focus on improving access and equity around clinical trials. And I noticed that Lynn Durham is here from Georgia, and I just want to give Lynn a shout out because Lynn from Georgia Car was an amazing partner in pushing this legislation through. So what lessons can we learn about what you're doing in Georgia to take this to other states that we hope will soon follow suit with their own bills, including Ohio, Maryland, and New York?
Well, first of all, you're correct. This past legislative session, Georgia goes into session. We have a 40-day session, 40 business days, and it starts the second Monday in January. So this year they did pass Senate Bill 223, which was sponsored by my predecessor, by my successor, Ben Watson in the Georgia State Senate, Dr. Watson, and signed into law by Governor Brian Kemp. And it is good legislation because what it does is to allow, as you know, to allow for reimbursement for travel expenses and for it not to be interpreted as coercion or inducement. And that's really the way it should be. Let's keep in mind that all of us know the importance of clinical trials. Has anybody ever been in a clinical trial? I actually went through the clinical trials for the COVID vaccine. I wanted to set a good example, and as both a healthcare professional, being a pharmacist, and also as a member of Congress. So I went through the clinical trials. We were reimbursed, and not a lot, and it was a gift. I, of course, didn't accept it, but I mean, I appreciated it. But this is a real problem, particularly when we talk about travel expenses. And we all understand how important it is to have a diverse group and to have a large group when you're doing clinical trials. It does no good to have just a few people. You need a diverse group, and it can be expensive, as was just pointed out earlier. This can run up into a lot of dollars, and that's what turns a lot of people away. And as we know, in cancer clinical trials, we only have like a 3% participation rate, and that's just not good. You need a much higher rate than that. So I applaud the Georgia State Legislature and what they did. I think it's extremely important. I think it's going to lead to better clinical trials with better outcomes, to give us the opportunity to study these drugs and to see what their benefits are, and ultimately it will lead to better health care within our state. Keep in mind, as I say at least 2 or 3 times every day, there are 2 Georgias. There's Atlanta and there's everywhere else. Well, I represent everywhere else. I represent South Georgia. I have the entire coast of Georgia and then a lot of South Georgia, and it's a very rural area. And we have a lot of room there. So there's a need for travel, and to be able to reimburse now for travel, whether it be the pharmaceutical manufacturer, whether it be a group such as this or whoever it is, that's going to help. It's going to be very beneficial. And again, I would like to think, and I do think, that the state of Georgia sets a good example with our health care and our policies. And there are some things we need to work on. There's no question about that. But I'm very proud of what we've done. I was vice chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee in the House and in the Senate there, so I had a lot of experience with that. But we've come a long ways, and this is another example of our commitment to making sure that we have accessible, affordable, quality health care.
And it's also a tremendous opportunity to really holistically address cancer health disparities and improve cancer health outcomes for all of the population of Georgia. So thank
That's
you.
right.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for that. Congresswoman Kelly, Congress is supposed to represent the voice of the people. But when it comes to health insurance, people often don't know what they're not being offered, like genomic testing. They're also rarely aware of payer mix and how that impacts the procedures made available to them. And I know that this is a topic that's very important to you. Do you ever view it as your job in Congress to help people find their voice? And how are you doing that?
Oh, I definitely think that's why I'm here. I represent my constituents in Washington, D.C., but also I don't just make it up. I listen to what my constituents' needs are. I live in the district, so I see some of the needs. My district is very diverse. It's urban, suburban, and rural. I live in the suburban part of my district. It changed drastically in January, and it's very diverse racially, and it's very diverse when it comes to economic development, the haves and the haves not. And yes, we get phone calls into our office every day and try and tell people, not just with insurance or health care, but all different kind of issues. And it's really from those phone calls that we can see what we can do in DC or in the district or with particular agencies to either make connections or sometimes complain because of how they're, treating people or bring, things to their attention. So yes, I look at myself as a big voice for my constituents and their needs. And not only my constituents, I mean, the things I work on, like I have a diversity in clinical trial bill. That's not just for my constituents, it's for people all over the United States. I work a lot on maternal mortality, and that's for everybody, not just my district, of course.
Well, thank you. And I, this has been, I really feel like we're all part of the process. And for those of us who are experiencing things personally that may not be going well or that we could do better or whatever, I just really appreciate your accessibility and the ability to have a transparent conversation with you and to just see where it goes and what we can do about it.
I encourage people to not only come to see us in DC, but come when we're back in the district. Actually, it's maybe a little bit less hectic back in the district where we have more time to spend with our constituents or groups to, hear what the issues are and the barriers and things like that.
Thank you. Well, Congresswoman Kelly, Congressman Pete Sessions, Congressman Buddy Carter, thank you all for your time today, and it looks like Congressman Carter has a parting comment.
I do. Never miss an opportunity to tout your own legislation. Folks, I've got a bill I want y'all to know about. It's called the Helps Copay Bill. Some of you may have heard about it. What these insurance companies are doing is that pharmaceutical manufacturers many times will give you a discount card so that you can get a discount on your initial medication. Might be $100 or whatever. And a lot of the insurance companies are not counting this toward your copay. So what we've got is called the Helps Copay. It's helping ensure lower copays for patients. And this would force the insurance companies to credit that to your deductible so that after you get the medication the first time, you don't come back the second or the third or the fourth time and all of a sudden you got a copay of $1,000. So this is good legislation, and I'm sure many cancer patients who are going through therapy have been impacted by this. So this is another example. It's bipartisan. Lisa Blunt Rochester and I are both members of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and we're the lead sponsors of it. So just
thank you.
Had to tout my own legislation. I'm sorry.
All right. We love it. Thank you all. Laura, back to you.
Thank you so much. Important to get those plugs in. Here's your stage. Thank you so much. That was a great conversation. I appreciate it. And it's important to go to our members to let them know how important these things are and the action that is being taken. We appreciate your attention to this because we all know the action is needed.
Thank you.
Now, before we get to our next panel, I do want to let you know that we will have 10 minutes at the end of each panel for audience questions. We've got a mic here in the room, and then you can enter questions on your chat. If you're watching on the live stream, just enter your questions in the live chat, and we'll do our best to get to all of the questions that you're entering. Our first panel this evening, and if we could close those doors so that we can hear everything, that would be awesome. Thank you. Thanks, honey. This is why I invite my husband to these events. Thank you. So our first panel this evening is all about genomic sequencing, and you heard Dana just talking about it. Many patients need it, but the ugly truth is this game-changing advance in cancer care, which matches patients to treatment based on their DNA, is not available to everyone. So we want to show you a video so you can better understand what genomic sequencing is all about. Take a look.
Meet Judy. She was just diagnosed with lung cancer too. But their courses of treatment are going to be very different because one got genomic testing of their cancer and the other did not. Meet Judy. She was just diagnosed with lung cancer. Meet Mark. He was just diagnosed with lung cancer too. But their courses of treatment are going to be very different because one got genomic testing of their cancer and the other did not. Mark's doctors ordered genomic testing first to better understand his specific cancer cells. The results guided them to a type of precise treatment that gives Mark a better chance of responding based on his DNA. Judy's doctors simply prescribed the standard treatment for lung cancer: surgery, chemo, and radiation. Cancers are caused by damage to the DNA in your cells. These changes are called gene mutations. Gene mutations can build up in cells in your body over time, and when cells have too many mutations, they may stop working normally, grow out of control, and become cancerous. So while two people may be diagnosed with the same type of cancer, therapies will work differently for them based upon their specific type of cancer cells and genomic mutations. Genomic testing, also called next-generation sequencing or NGS, helps us understand those differences. That's why it's a critically important advance in cancer treatment, because it matches you and your specific genomics to the best treatment opportunity. Some hospitals do these tests. Patients can also be referred to private companies that do them. That information is then shared with your doctor, so when they look at the trials and treatments available for your type of cancer, they can find the best match for you. Mark's genomic test helped his doctors find a clinical trial for his exact type of cancer after their first treatment option failed. Now that he's enrolled in the trial and receiving his new medication, his tumors are decreasing in size. And he feels stronger and better than ever. He's feeling so good, he just went on a cruise with his wife. Judy had surgery and multiple rounds of chemo and radiation, leaving her tired and nauseous. Unfortunately, the treatment did not impact her cancer. Her doctors told her there's nothing else they can do for her, and she's not sure of her next steps. If you or someone you love is diagnosed with cancer, here's what you need to know about genomic testing. First, get it immediately, as soon as you're diagnosed with cancer. Knowing the genomic makeup of your tumor will determine your treatment, and time often matters with a cancer diagnosis. Secondly, genomic testing will help, not hurt you. Rigorous regulations and protections are in place to ensure that results aren't widely distributed or used in a way that harms individuals or groups. Insurance may cover genomic testing. If not, there are assistance programs and advocacy organizations that can help. Most importantly, know that genomic testing is for everyone, no matter where you live, what insurance you have, your age, ethnicity, the language you speak, or who your doctor is or how much money you make. This is a cancer advancement that everyone should know about and ask for. To learn more about genomic testing and how it can help you access cancer treatment, including a clinical trial, visit lazarex.org.
member at Harvard, and Lazarex very important patient, Jo Mary. Please join us. And also joining us at the table is Dana Dornsife. As you've met her, she is the Lazarex founder and Chief Mission and Strategy Officer. I will stay up here at the podium and ask you your questions from here. Unfortunately, Chip Petricoin could not join us today, but we are so happy to have with us Dr. Nina Hayter, who is bringing a wealth of information to this conversation. So before we start, let me just start with you, Jo Mary. Thank you also for traveling. Where did you come from today?
From Kansas City.
From Kansas. So thank you for taking the trip. I appreciate you coming. I know you're in the midst of cancer treatments yourself. Mm-hmm. You have been supported by Lazarex for some time. Let's start, because you can tell your firsthand experience about this, about how insurance has made it harder, not easier, for you to get genomic testing. And how hard was it for you to get the genomic sequencing after you were diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer?
Right. It wasn't that it was difficult to get the genomic testing. What was difficult was the paying for it. I was lucky enough to find myself in the care of an oncologist who basically was wanting to do whatever it was that he could do to help me out. And I was very, very ill by the time I was diagnosed. I spent 6 months with progressively worse, crushing headaches just on the right side of my head that nobody could figure out what was going on. It was discovered after I started my round of second opinions. I found myself in the presence of a brilliant young woman, neurologist, who listened to me, and she, knowing the history of stroke and aneurysm in my family, she wanted me to have a CT scan that would check my vascular system to make sure there wasn't any of that going on. And that CT scan just happened to go below the level of my collarbone, which revealed the mass the size of my fist in the upper lobe of my left lung. And so then from there was referred to oncology. And I found myself in the presence of a truly an angel in medicine. And so he ordered a PET scan, which then revealed that I had Mets to my liver. Oh, and I have to back up. I had an MRI to my head, and it turns out that my headaches were Mets to the bones of my skull, and that was where my headaches were coming from.
And I understand in the end you ended up paying out of pocket for the genomic testing.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, so I had both a tissue biopsy, which was sent off for genomic testing, as well as a blood biopsy. Now, this was January of 2020, and my oncologist knew that there was going to be trouble getting insurance to pay for this, but we just went ahead and did it anyway. The blood biopsy came back faster, and what it revealed was that I had this EGFR mutation to my lung cancer, which they understood was going to respond to a targeted medication. And then the tissue biopsy came after. The insurance company fully denied the tissue genomic testing right out of the gate. And so in the end, it was probably between $7,000 and $10,000 for this testing, which, it helped me meet my out-of-pocket deductible quite quickly.
Well, that's good news.
Which is a good thing.
You've said, I know in your conversations with my team, that it's not lost on you what a privilege that is.
Right.
But you're in the minority because it was the connections that really made this possible for you. I want to go to Dr. Hayter now, because you've been talking, and I'll come back to you, Jo Mary. Mm-hmm. Dr. Hayter, you have had your hands in this for a long time as the founder of Shifa Precision. Talk to me about how this technology has evolved over the years, and how this is becoming more important for patients today.
Thank you. Yes, so I was actually part of the Genome Project. I always say I look much younger than I am. And so I've seen the evolution of genomics and functional genomics and the power of what we can learn from our genome and understanding that. And it's integral. And with today's technology and advances, it should be standard protocol. It shouldn't be something that we need to wait and go through steps and have denials. It should just be standard protocol at this point. Mm-hmm. And that's actually, perhaps most of the panel doesn't know this even. I was a survivor myself a couple of years ago, and it pushed me to build SHIFA because there's technology and advances that come to us, and we have the knowledge base, and I want to be there to help provide that for everybody else.
Mm-hmm. And Dana, you've been at work on this issue, working with patients and access over nearly 2 decades. I'm curious how this type of research has shown up for you in your patient work, and how the requirement that people have access to it in order to benefit, how that has struck you.
So I think what's striking to me is that there is such potential for genomic testing to make such a tremendous difference in cancer health disparities and also improving cancer health outcomes. But sadly, it's not. And the reason, or it is for a few. And the reason that it's only for a few is, and I think Jo Mary's example is captures it perfectly, it's out of reach. We have patients calling us every day, and we literally spend hours on the phone with patients when we ask them, have you had genomic testing? Well, I don't know, I'm not sure, I may have, I don't really know. What is it? You know, and then we have to explain what's genomic testing. Well, why would I want to do that? And then we have to explain why they would want to do it and how it really does help to identify the best course of action for a cancer patient to potentially take. And then, you know, well, how much is that going to cost? Because, of course, this comes at a time where you're already experiencing devastating financial toxicity, right? And so everything becomes about not what is best for me, but what can I afford to do, right? And so, you know, for us, this is where the rubber meets the road. And, you know, we're all about removing barriers, and this is a really important barrier that needs to be removed. It's something that really will help us strike a chord of equity in the types of treatments that we can have access to. And fortunately, at Lazarex Cancer Foundation, we've been able to develop relationships with companies who are willing to provide genomic testing right now free of charge for those who cannot afford to pay it. And so, so we're connecting those individuals, but it's a long and hard process. It takes a long time right now to get the results back. One of the biggest issues that we have is when the companies who are very willing to do the testing request a tissue block or a sample or whatever, you know, the institutions they're requesting it from, literally, it could take 5 or 6 weeks to just get the sample. It's a travesty. And so, you know, and those institutions aren't really sure. I mean, the tissue belongs to the patient, right? But the patient doesn't know that. The institution doesn't treat it like that. And so it's such a conundrum, and it's a very complicated issue, but slowly and surely we're working our way through it. And, you know, we're hoping to be able to make some headway. And I will say that in our state legislative efforts, we've now added coverage or reimbursement for genomic testing in our state legislative efforts, and Georgia actually adopted that. So now I'm not saying the state will cover it, okay? But it is an acknowledged barrier and an acknowledged area of reimbursement, you know, that we need to be paying attention to.
Baby steps, making a little headway
baby
here.
Baby steps, we're getting there.
It's
only
education.
getting better. The cost of the testing is coming down. So I do believe there's tremendous promise there. We just have to harness it.
We need to disrupt more.
Let's
That's why we're
disrupt.
here.
Yes.
So we're hearing, Dr. Lowy, I want to bring you to the conversation. We're hearing a lot more about precision therapy these days. And as one of the leaders at the National Cancer Institute, I want to get your perspective because I'm curious where this research is going, and especially related to genomic sequencing. Is it becoming more of a center point for drug development?
Yeah, Laura, thanks so much. First, let me agree with what Dana has been saying, which is that reimbursement for genomic testing is a problem. It's especially a problem, as Jo Mary explains, for people who don't have the financial wherewithal to cover the co-pays and even other issues. On the other hand, it's becoming very important. The first EGF receptor inhibitors were shown to be effective in 2004. And prior to that time, there really wasn't the need for doing the genomic testing for most people with cancer. But this was a game changer for lung cancer, and the situation has only gotten better as there are more and more targets identified in lung cancer for which there are treatments that are now FDA approved. If we fast forward to 2 days ago at the ASCO meeting and a publication just 2 days ago also in the New England Journal of Medicine, while the FDA approval for EGF receptor inhibitors has been for people like Jo Mary with advanced cancer, this was a randomized controlled study of people with much earlier lung cancer, and there's a substantial mortality benefit from the people with the lung cancer who were treated with EGF receptor inhibitors. And I should also emphasize, although most people who get lung cancer have been smokers, EGF receptor mutations occur at least as frequently in people who develop lung cancer who are not smokers. So as the video said, especially for lung cancer, everyone who has a diagnosis of lung cancer should be able to get genomic testing. So that's to try to put it in perspective. This was not true 20 years ago, but it's true today. And the situation, we think, will only get better in terms of the opportunities for treatment. And we need to make sure that the opportunities that patients have for getting genomic testing matches the advances in the treatment.
So let me ask you a follow-up, Dr. Lowy. If people don't have access, aren't we creating that larger divide between the haves and have-nots? And how can we close the gap on access?
Well, I think from my perspective, in having talked with someone who actually runs a cancer center at a safety net hospital, the problem first is at the level of Medicare, where there are problems of copays. In addition, Medicare has a waiting period of 14 days when you first get a diagnosis. And I really think that it might have been a good idea at the time, but getting the genomic testing is really important. And having this, having these guidelines and rules changed in favor of the patient, something that I think would really be helpful. And with Medicaid, as Dana says, Georgia is one of the few states that now has really mandating genomic testing for Medicaid patients. But we want, what I think Medicaid would tend to do is to follow Medicare. So I think that the touch point could be Medicare.
Dr. Hayter, do you have any thoughts on that?
I completely agree with what's been said, and I think that, one of the prompts for what I want to do is to level these disparities that we see in the healthcare system. And as somebody that works in the genomics field that does this, it doesn't have to cost you $7,000. It shouldn't. SHFA's costs are half of that what insurance covers already, and will give you 100 times more. And that's what I wanted to do in this, is that we need to create systems where everybody has equal opportunity if there's treatments out there, if there's ways you can be helped early on, if you can predict, if you can help people, it should be available. And we shouldn't have these barriers that exist. And there's ways we're going to disrupt together and make that happen.
So Dana, how can we disrupt this? What are the solutions? You're the visionary here.
So, right now, there are lots of companies out there. I mean, let's talk about big data, right? And this is not something that, we don't want necessarily our personal data out there or whatever, but I think for right now, Laura, the solution lies within those companies who are willing to provide genomic testing free of charge to those who don't have insurance or whose insurance won't cover it, because the data is more valuable than the cost of the test. And so, they're able to leverage the accumulation of big data to support other projects or products that their companies may be involved in. And so, I think that for now, that is a solution, that we can look at as a stopgap. But, you've heard the term health is a human right, right? Genomic testing for a cancer patient is truly a lifeline. And the direction that we're moving in with targeted and precision medicine and immunotherapies really requires that a patient be able to undergo genomic testing in order to determine what is best for them. And if we are not allowing our patients to do that, we literally are signing their death certificate in some instances, because we're withholding the right to live, potentially, based upon these treatments that are out there and in some instances available, not just in clinical trials, right? So I do think that this does require input on policy and legislation at the federal level. I think it requires policy and legislation at the state level. And that's also a very complicated, issue between the feds and the state and what we can and what we can't do. But that's where we have to go. And in the meantime, we will rely upon the grace of those companies out there who are willing to help us provide this testing free of charge.
Yeah, and I want to dig into Shifa in just a second, but Joe, I want to get your reaction to all of this that you're hearing. You're in it, you've been through it. What's your reaction? I know there's a bit of frustration and anger on your part.
The frustration is or perhaps underlying anger isn't for myself so much as it is about people who just don't have access to this. My privilege is not lost on me at all. So everything that you're doing is great, and me being able to have that genomic sequencing allowed me to go on my first line of treatment, which by the time I started the targeted medication on March 10th, 2020, and by late November, the mass in my lung and the mass in my liver had reduced by 90%. Yeah, there's some claps to that. But eventually that drug ceased to be effective, and so then my disruptor oncologist, he was like, well, let's move. So our choices are, A, we can go the route of chemotherapy and radiation, or we can go the route of clinical trial. And I said to him, if I was your mother, what would you tell me to do? And he said clinical trial. And so we said, go. And found the clinical trial that I'm in right now. I started it the first week in August in 2021. And for the first 6 to 7 weeks, my wife and I were traveling every week to go to St. Louis, paying for, and this is when gas prices were crazy, right? And being able to afford the cost of the hotel and travel and all of that. And then Lazarex was another angel that came in, and it's because of that we took the burden of that paying for the travel was taken away. And so now I'm almost 2 years into the clinical trial, and you wouldn't know it by looking at me.
No.
You right? And so I want for everybody to be able to have the great benefit that I've been able to enjoy.
Yeah.
No matter
Thank you.
what their zip code is.
Thank you for your comment. Dr. Lowy, you had something you wanted to add?
I just, since there are a lot of people in the audience who don't have a medical background, let me first make sure that you understand that cancer treatment trials are not placebo-controlled.
No.
The trial usually there are two-arm trials, and the one arm gets the best available care, and then as one of my colleagues said, the other arm gets the best available care plus hope.
I like that.
Thank you.
I like that. That's good. That's good. I think we're going to be hearing that again, Dana.
Yes.
Dr. Hayda, tell me about about Shifa. I was going to say Dr. Shifa, about Shifa Precision, because you were saying that you're trying to provide this free to patients.
Yes. If somebody needs it, I want us to have that built in. And so what Shifa Precision will become is we're building an AI platform. Imagine Google on a molecular level. And imagine us being able to take your macromolecular information, shared, firewall, not giving to anybody, not sharing, not for your health provider professionals. And imagine us being able to build your molecular avatar. And now we can be able to do prevention, prediction, and we can get to understand give the healthcare professionals, let us be your Library of Congress. Let us give you the information so you can make the best decisions possible so you can get that. I love that saying, best care plus hope.
Yeah.
We want to be part of that hope.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to invite anybody who has questions now to please come up. If you do, please raise your hand. You can come up to the mic, and we welcome your questions too online. Dana, you were talking about solutions, and I'm just curious if there's something new that comes to mind after hearing Joe's story, after listening to Dr. Lowy and Dr. Hayter. If there's something new that we can do to help disrupt this issue and bring it to the voices, to the people who need to make the decisions.
So, gosh, I think that it's really knowledge is power, right? And so for those of us who know about the power of genomic testing, Jo Mary's an example of that. Julie, Joe's wife, just said before this event, I am telling every single client I have, every single person who I come in touch with about this, right? And so the more people who know about it, the more who know, the more will go,
Yep.
right? And so, and that's really what it needs to get down to,
Yeah,
is disseminating the information, disseminating the proper information. But it's not enough to dangle a carrot. We disseminate information, but then we have to provide the pathway, right? So that people can actually take advantage of the testing.
Dr. Lucille Adams-Campbell from Georgetown has a question.
Great panel. Just want to disrupt another side. The patients are always the victim. They suffer from all angles. But what about the providers that aren't even up to date on genomics and genetics? That's a huge problem. I'm going through this with a friend of mine who's a woman diagnosed with lung cancer with no smoking history, and that little video was absolutely great. And I'm thinking about it. She went to 2 places. Georgetown, yes, we're going to sign off and have all the genomic testing done. And if you get the bill, it's not a bill. It's really just a little statement, and you don't have to pay it because they want the data. The other place, no mention of it. So how do we really impact the providers or educate the providers so that they will help the patients?
Oh, boy. That is a loaded question, and we did not, that was not a plant, by the way. That is a legitimate inquiry, okay?
This is why we love Dr. Adams Campbell. She shakes it
Yeah.
up.
So I think part of this boils down to the institution that our medical professionals are engaged with, right? And it doesn't it's not necessarily a reflection of their knowledge base or their level of education. It could be, right? But not necessarily. I think that it is more a reflection of what their institution has adopted as far as their payer mix and the types of insurance that they will or will not accept, and what they're able to offer or not. I truly believe that's what it comes down to.
And I would just add to what you just said, there's a disparity in terms of maybe a safety net hospital not even being offered the insurance that will provide this. So I just think there are many angles to
Yes.
addressing this issue.
I'm going to add one more angle to that I think will be powerful as we are developing things, telehealth. Telehealth and coming up with ways that as healthcare providers across the nation have different access, different, bandwidths, that can help level things where everybody's at the same playing field of what they're exposed to, what is made available for information to.
Just don't forget the digital divide.
Oh, we don't, believe me. You'll hear about that in our next panel.
Hi, I'm Jeff Kramer. I'm with the Chondrosarcoma Foundation. Chondrosarcoma, for those of you who don't know it, is a very rare bone cancer. And we had just launched a patient registry, natural history study, along with NORD, which is the National Organization for Rare Diseases. And it's only a couple months that we've been in there, but so far we have about 135 patients that are registered. And the data indicates there's a few things that I just wanted to point out. One thing is 53% of our sample have been misdiagnosed. Out of that, 7% have gotten genomic testing. So we really need to advocate that this become part of the diagnostic protocol. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be part of the NCCN guidelines so that insurance will provide reimbursement. And I think, it's a matter of us as patient advocates, it's a matter of, NCI and some of the government agencies to all pull our resources together to advocate that this become part of the protocol. And I believe that genomics have the keys for finding effective treatment and cures. And just think if we, I want to know who these people that are giving free genomic testing are, because I'd love to see everybody in our registry have that test so that we could aggregate that data and look at that data as a whole, and I think it would be meaningful.
So Erin, I know you're out there, raise your hand. Erin, talk to her, she'll connect,
Thank you.
Yeah. And I would just like to make one more point, and that is that a lot of us talk about, Jo Mary has very vividly described her experience. So the patient is the beneficiary of genomic testing, right? And it's important for patients to have genomic testing, but it actually goes beyond the patient. And for a lot of our researchers and our medical professionals who are involved in clinical trials and research, having access to patients with a particular genomic or genetic mutation is critical to be able to get new drugs and treatments to market. So it's really a two-way street, and a lot of the comprehensive cancer centers do offer genomic testing as a rule, but we really need to get that down into to the community level.
Hi everyone, my name is Darla Culberson, and I work for a lab. I work for a lab called Ambry Genetics. I found out about this conference very last minute, so I came and I wanted to offer just a little bit of information and support also. I work for Ambry Genetics, who's been around for over 20 years. We are partnered with most of the insurance companies in the United States, where most patients do not have to pay for genetic testing at all. I work in the DC and Northern Virginia area, and I work with all the hospital systems and the doctors. I speak with them on a daily basis, and I advocate about genetic testing and taking a proactive approach to healthcare, a preventative, proactive approach to healthcare to make it equitable, affordable, and accessible. I am extremely passionate about this, and I wanted to just give some information that Ambry, I can speak for Ambry at least, where most patients do not pay for testing, depending on their healthcare provider, of course, and whatever their policy entails. But I can say 9 times out of 10, patients don't pay anything. If they do have an out-of-pocket at all that is over $100, and this is on our website, it's in our billing policy, someone from our lab in our billing department will contact that patient and let them know, so there's no unaware patient at all. We do want to make this affordable and accessible for everyone. So I just wanted to offer that. We're approaching also the 10-year anniversary where, I don't know if you all are familiar with it was the Supreme Court unanimously ruled against you're unable to patent a gene. There was a lab that tried to patent a gene that did not make it accessible for everyone. And it was my company, Ambry Genetics, that took that lab to court and said, you can't patent this. This belongs to science. And we're approaching the 10-year anniversary. It was, I believe, June 13th when that happened in 2013. So we're really excited about that. But I did bring some information, and I can leave it here, and also my business card where anyone can contact me, and I'm always available. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any final thoughts? Joe, I'll give you the last word.
Oh, wow, thanks. I think that all of this, making this the genomic testing more accessible and available to patients, is going to allow the good, fine people, the caregivers, the healthcare providers, to do their job better, right? To make decisions that will help patients the same way that they helped me.
Yeah, I think that's very profound and very true. Thank you so much. Joe, Dana, Dr. Lowy, Dr. Hayter, thank you so much for such an eye-opening conversation. And now, before we get to our next panel, I want to take a moment to give special recognition to 2 individuals who are shaking up the status quo. We keep talking about disruption, and we love people who shake it up. They are shaking up the status quo and inspiring change through their commitment to improve cancer care. And we call them disruptors because they are doing the work to make positive change a true reality. Past disruptors include Senator Bob Menendez, Congressman Jamie Raskin and Bobby Rush, WebMD's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. John White, Dr. Fabian Sandoval, who's here with us today. He's from the Emerson Clinical Research Institute. Today's show anchor Craig Melvin, and Drexel University's Dr. Loretta Jamat also with us today too. So those are our included in our past disruptors. And our first recipient today is a well-known CNN journalist. But since the tragic death of his 9-month-old daughter, Francesca, to a brain tumor, he has been a dad on a mission to fight pediatric brain cancer and give hope to families who have a child diagnosed with this devastating disease. Andrew Kaczynski put one foot in front of the other, literally and figuratively, to turn his family's heartbreak into hope for others. In 2021, Andrew started the Infant Brain Tumor Program at Boston's Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, where baby Francesca, or Beans as she was lovingly called, was treated. In 2022, Team Beans, you may have heard about this, became the #1 internal Jimmy Fund fundraising team. And in just 2 years, and thousands of grassroots donor Team Beans Infant Brain Tumor Fund raised over $3 million, all going to help in the search for cures for childhood brain cancer. But beyond that, Andrew has used his voice and his platform to raise awareness about the challenges of cancer care for its littlest patients, sharing his family's story and honoring little Beans. So Andrew, it makes me cry. You've been through so much. You are an amazing guy. You have done so much through tragedy, and you've described your efforts to fight childhood cancer as a way of staying true to your responsibility. I'm a mom who, I'm sorry, it's just amazing what you've been through. Your responsibility to take care of Beans, and you are doing that and more. For all the work you have done in memory of your daughter to raise funds and to shine a light on the importance and urgency of finding cures for childhood brain cancer, we want to honor you as a 2023 Lazarex Disruptor. I'll hand that to you now. I'm all verklempt. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. So, it's really an honor to accept this award and just be in a room with so many people who know firsthand, whether it's also through the care you provide, or whether it was a family member, just that, that experience of hearing that word, those words, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a loved one, whether, for me it was my daughter, just hearing those words that someone or your child has cancer. And, I first heard those words in September of 2020 when my daughter was diagnosed. She only lived 4 months longer after that and passed away on Christmas Eve of 2020. And, it's still surreal for me to think about the fact that she's been gone so long and she lived such a short life. But just the people that followed her story, she really had such a tremendous impact. So I kind of think about this award. It's not really for me, it's more for her. In the years since her death, we've raised $3 million for the Infant Brain Tumor Program. But the truth about that is, it's never going to be enough because Francesca didn't get to live the life she should have. And, the progress towards cures has been far, far, far too slow. If there's something that I'd like, whether it's the people here who work in policy or the private interest stakeholders to take note of, it's just that I wish that we could really put our best foot forward more for our kids. Kids with cancer, they don't have lobbyists here on Capitol Hill arguing on their behalf. They just have families with personal stories. And too often, kids with cancer, because whether they don't vote, whether because research into rare disease isn't as profitable, it too often seems like they do sometimes come last. The government can and should do more for these kids, and no matter how far that we get from Francesca's life, no matter how distant it is from that time that we had together, I'm going to continue to, whether it's raise money or fight for kids, because, you know, cancer stole from her the life that she should have had. And I just feel like it's very much on me to do that for her behalf. So just from our family, I want to thank you guys for recognizing me and her with this, and just know that we'll continue to do this.
Whew. You are a brave man, very brave man, and you are a good man, and you're doing such amazing things. So congratulations, Andrew, and thank you for allowing us to recognize you in this way, you and your daughter. Also today, we want to honor the work of a man whose research and innovation is reaching every corner of the world. Dr. Douglas Lowy is most well known for his joint research with Dr. John T. Schiller, which led to the development of the cervical cancer, or HPV, vaccine intended to prevent a cancer. While many may check that box and call it a day, Dr. Lowy continues to be a force of change in the cancer research community and a visionary for equitable access to his life-saving vaccine and other treatments. His latest research, alongside Dr. Amy Kramer, illustrates his commitment to expand access and increase vaccination rates of the HPV vaccine by reducing the number of required vaccine shots from 2 to just 1. So Dr. Lowy, for your optimism in the cancer research field, your perseverance in making this miracle vaccine, the HPV vaccine, accessible to more women around the world, and for improving the outlook and quality of life for countless people throughout your leadership, we honor you as a 2023 Lazarex Disruptor.
Laura, thanks so much. Before I get to my acceptance remarks, I just want to say that having people like Joe, Mary, and Andrew really tells us what's really important about cancer. There is a risk for cancer to seem like statistics, but cancer is people. Cancer is our loved ones, our parents, our children, our spouses, our best friends, etc. And so this really, I think, highlights what should be forward, really front and center. I'd like to thank the Lazarex Foundation, not just for the award, but for all that you do to try to make clinical trials more equitable. And then I want to thank you for two other things in terms of the award. First, when we think about cancer, understandably, we think about cancer treatment, how to cure patients. But I really appreciate the idea that you're giving an award for cancer prevention. And what I like to say is that the beauty of cancer prevention is there are no grateful patients. But a limitation of cancer prevention is there are no grateful patients. But the other thing I want to thank you for is the notion that somebody who works for the federal government could be a disruptor. Now, that is a game changer, and I really appreciate it. So developing the vaccine was one aspect, but nothing is done in a vacuum. Nothing is done by yourself. I'm so pleased that you acknowledged the contribution of John Schiller, but my colleague Amy Kramer is the person who's really going to try to make that single dose not just an idea, but a reality by developing the evidence that will lead to that. And just so you know, when you look at Amy's smiling face, because she's going to come up and tell you about that disruption. In 2019, when we were doing our big study, unfortunately, the principal investigator in Costa Rica, where we do our studies, where cervical cancer has been the #1 cancer for women for a long time, she unfortunately developed lung cancer and died from it in her early 40s, and she was a non-smoker. So on almost no preparation, Amy, her husband Brad, and their 3 children moved from the Bethesda area down to Costa Rica and only stayed there for a little over a year when the COVID pandemic actually forced them to go back to make sure that the patients that needed to be enrolled in the trial would be enrolled. So Amy is not just a cancer researcher, not just an amazing person, but really dedicated to doing this. So Amy, please come up and tell everybody about the disruptor.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak. So first, just to talk about this vaccine that Dr. Lowy and Dr. Schiller developed. It counters HPV infection. It prevents HPV infection. This is a cause of cancer at 6 anatomic sites. So now that we have this vaccine, we can prevent cervical cancer, vulvar, vaginal, penile, anal cancer, and some throat cancers. So how tremendous. We now have this vaccine that protects against cancer at 6 anatomic sites. These vaccines were proven safe and efficacious 17 years ago. And while the US has moderate uptake, globally, in girls who are supposed to be getting this vaccine, less than 10% do. And it is absolutely about access to the vaccine. So 3 doses is expensive, it's infeasible, it requires coming many times. 1 dose is the answer. So I'm currently running 4 HPV vaccine trials in Costa Rica, and we used one of them where women were supposed to get 3 doses, but some of them only got 1, to see, and this was a decade ago, this nugget of evidence that 1 dose might work the same as 3 doses. And so we, with Doug, with our team, we're like, look at these data. So we go and we start talking about it in our research community. And this 1 dose for this type of vaccine is against vaccine dogma. You're supposed to need multiple doses. So everyone, we're standing at podiums and people are throwing basically verbal tomatoes at us. And they're like, what doesn't work? It's not vaccine dogma. And I say to Doug, no one's listening. What are we gonna do? He says, keep going. And with that, we have kept going. We have multiple trials in the field, and I can almost promise you that by the middle of this decade, we will have tremendous movement globally towards access to this amazing life-saving vaccine. And already, the World Health Organization has started to make recommendations, but really they wait for us. And so in this way, I really do see Dr. Lowy as a disruptor, because every time we would stand up and we would say, we think this is truth, they would push back and he would say, keep going. I just want to make one other comment about how Dr. Lowy is a disruptor. I've had the honor to work with him for nearly 20 years. 20 years ago, I'm walking in, I'm nervous, I feel like an imposter, into this room of, very senior men, and he supports me, and he listens to me, and he's an active listener. And so, Dr. Lowy, I would like to say thank you for being a disruptor in this field where women have, are equal contributors, and embracing, people from all walks of life, because you really do disrupt even the culture at NIH, where you are so inclusive and so amazing and listen to everyone's voices. So a scientific disruptor and also really changing the culture of how people engage in science. So thank you for all your work, and thank you for giving me this chance to say something.
Thanks to you both. That was wonderful, and congratulations. Congratulations, Dr. Kramer, on all your work, too. Amazing, absolutely incredible. So over the past few years, we have been pulling the curtain back slowly but surely on what we call the dirty little secret in healthcare. It's the role that insurance can play in determining whether a patient receives the best possible treatment for their cancer. And the truth is, the type of insurance you have is often the decider. And too often it comes down to not what treatment will be the most effective, but what treatment is the cheapest. We call this a dirty little secret because most insurance and medical institutions just simply don't want to talk about it. But at Disrupting the System, we want to have these tough and provocative conversations to bring these issues out of the shadows and into the open. So joining us to discuss whether insurance could be putting patients' health at risk are Dr. Amira Clemens, newly crowned doctor. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Clemens is a cancer care companion at the Lazarex Cancer Wellness Hub. We also have with us Dr. Natalie Davis, CEO of United States of Care. Thank you, Natalie, for being here. Our very important patient, Shenard Matthews. Shenard, thank you for traveling all the way from Louisiana to be with us. He is a VIP with Lazarex, very important patient, and Dr. Maria Shagog, Health, Equity, and Diversity Director at Lazarex Cancer Foundation. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us in this discussion. Shenard, I would like to start with you. And thank you again for sharing your story. We're going to dig in a little bit more on that. You have lung cancer, you live in Louisiana, and you are now part of a clinical trial at MD Anderson. You travel to Texas regularly for your clinical trial, and I know Lazarex has supported you for some time. Can you tell us, has your insurance helped or hurt you in getting your treatment?
It hurt. Like I said, I was diagnosed last year, July the 6th, stage 4. They told me nothing could do it for me. So I got a second opinion called MD Anderson and told them my situation. And they said, well, what's your occupation? I said, I'm an operator at a chemical plant. And they said, okay. So I made the reservation to go to Houston. Met with a social worker, and they told me my first visit was $7,000. And before they can see me, did I have any insurance? I said, yes, I have good insurance, United Health. So when she put it in, 5 minutes later, she came back and said, they denied me. So I'm like, wait a minute. I have stage 4. I have a tumor on my spinal cord, a tumor in my lung, and a tumor in my side. If they don't find that tumor in my spinal cord, they can paralyze me. So I'm telling her this, and she's telling me, well, Mr. Matthew, I'm sorry, your insurance company don't want to pick it up to say I'm a higher risk. So I just left out there crying, and I didn't know what to do. So a lady called me. She heard me fussing and hollering there. And she told me about Lazarus. And I called them and we spoke. So I went back to MD Anderson and they said, well, we can do this. We can put you on a clinical trial. So I'm looking at them, I'm like, you mean tell me, in order for me to get help to see my daughter graduate, you telling me I gotta do a guinea pig? So they told me I have a choice, either do it or basically die. I said, okay, I'll take the clinical trial. So I called my insurance company and I asked them, I said, well, look, the first visit is $7,000. What can y'all do for me? Mr. Matthews, I'm sorry, but we denied it again. You're just a high risk. So again, if it wasn't for Lazarus, for the reimbursement to help me to pay for it, I wouldn't be here right now.
To travel, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you're here, and we're glad you're sharing your story because it's so important. Natalie, I'm curious what your reaction is to this. I know as, US of Care, if you can explain to the audience what US of Care is, you see this a lot.
Yeah, well, thank you first for having me, but for the people sharing their stories, it's hard and so important, especially here in Washington, for policymakers to hear stories directly from people. In Lazarex, you started every panel hearing from people's stories, and that's so important. It's very similar to what we do at United States of Care. We believe in building a more fair healthcare system, and that in order to do that, we need to do change differently, and that starts with listening to people. Systemic change we think of as a big idea, but it is about people. We go across the country and talk to people what they want out of the healthcare system. We have found 12 places people across demographics agree on that they want change, like politically, ethnicity, race, income, geography, and those issues, the 12 policy issues that people want us to work on, and what we do every day at the state capitals, here in Congress with the administration, and the things that we hear about often with insurance. I would pick up the phone, talk to people and say, okay, here, tell me about your experiences with healthcare. How do you think about how you experience healthcare system? And people always say to me, I'm happy to tell you, Natalie, but my experience is so different because I'm either too poor or I'm too rich. I'm either too dumb or I'm too smart. I'm too sick, I'm too healthy. So I do healthcare differently, but I'm happy to tell you my story. And then people go on and tell me the same story. And it's often frustrations with their insurance. People don't feel like it is there for them when they need it. The certainty that healthcare, that our insurance can provide for us is lacking. And that's something that we work on every day to make sure that people have certainty they can afford their healthcare, that their coverage is there and dependable when we need it. Often people talk about, my insurance is not there if I get sick, if I have a baby, if I lose my job during a pandemic. My insurance isn't there, and so I don't believe it's dependable for me. And that's a lot of the work that we do here in the Capitol and in the states to make sure that people have dependable coverage they can afford.
Yeah. And Maria, let me bring you into this, Dr. Maria Shagag. As a representative of Lazarex, what's your reaction to Shenard's story? I'm sure you hear this all the time from patients that Lazarex serves. Is this and I know you have your own firsthand experience with this as well. Talk about that, and how has that impacted the work that you're currently doing?
So my reaction is absolute anger and irate, because I am pretty sure that every time Shenard got paid, his insurance was taken out. I'm pretty sure that every time he got paid, that his insurance was taken out. So at the moment that the insurance said, well, thank you for your money, that we know you're working hard to earn, but we can't support you, it makes me mad. I'm actually applause his calmness in retelling the story. And we see it all the time. And we see it not only in the ways of you can't get service, but then in partial service. We'll give you a ride, like you have insurance, we'll help you get your cancer treatment, but we won't give you a ride in the winter. What are we talking about? Like, it doesn't make sense that the insurance companies, one, can do this, they do this, and they continue to do this without accountability. So we see in communities, people, one, yes, they feel abandoned, they're abandoned at their greatest time of need. They feel, they are abandoned. They also are unable to complete their care, and they're just trying to live. And so it should not be a question of, I can't make it here because I don't have the money. The word insurance means it's supposed to insure when you can't. That's why we pay car insurance, because most of us can't pay for another whatever $1,000 car. We pay insurance that they will pay for it if something happens. It's the same thing, but it works well with cars, but not with people. That's ludicrous that we pay all this insurance for all these different things, and where it falls down the most is within the human, with humans, with people. So I guess, and in my personal life, when I had cancer, I had bad insurance. And so I ended up paying out of pocket. I mean, the insurance was like, it was designed supposedly for somebody who didn't have cancer. Okay, I volunteered, I guess, whatever, but then also it meant that, I felt like I was making deals with the devil. I had to make, I'll pay you $20 a month for the next 10 months, or actually 10 years, so that I can pay off this bill, so that I can live. So it's a double, as someone said, that it's a double-edged sword. You don't have enough, you have too much, and all it is a crack that they really shove people in so that they don't have to pay out.
So Dr. Clemens, let me bring you into this conversation because you are the boots on the ground working with Lazarex, the Lazarex Cancer Wellness Hub, in one of the worst, one of the areas in West Philadelphia, which has one of the worst health outcomes in the nation. And I would imagine you see this all the time. This is just kind of, well, yeah, this is the norm. Is that right? Mm-hmm. What's your reaction, number one? And number two, do you believe that this is just an issue for insurance, or is this an issue at the institutional levels too?
It's a deep-rooted issue. Yes, with boots on the ground, I work for, or I participate with the Lazarex Cancer Wellness Hub, and part of my responsibility is to try to get more Black and brown people into clinical trials because we're severely underrepresented, and that means that we don't know how cancer medication and treatment can help us because we don't participate. And we're out educating, we're providing information and resources to get people to screening and treatment and things like that. But my concern is that once we finally get people to the clinical trials or people to the treatment that they need, that insurance becomes the barrier. Mm-hmm. So it's, we're out reeling people in. We're out talking to people, telling them, nobody has to die from cancer. In 2023, no one has to die from cancer. But because we're up against the barriers of, as explained here, that people don't understand clinical trials. People feel like they're going to be guinea pigs. But once we educate them, we give them the knowledge, we give them the support, and we provide them with what they need, then the barrier becomes their insurance doesn't pay for it. Mm-hmm. So we do all of this work in vain and then run into a barrier that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. So Natalie, what do we do about this? I know, Natalie, it all falls on you, my friend. No, what are you seeing coming out of Congress? I know you work a lot on policy. What is US of Care doing to address this?
Yeah, I mean, there are huge issues, like you said, and I think it's so important that we have so many initiatives focused on communities of color, people who speak English as a second language. It is so important to build a more fair healthcare system that we focus not on the healthy and wealthy, which usually means focusing on white people. And so I think it's so important that Lazarex is doing that. There's a lot of work happening in Congress and with the administration, though I think there needs to be more. When we look at the insurance, there's ways that we're talking about surprise billing and other ways to make costs more transparent, to make sure people understand what is going to be coming out of pocket, what they need to pay for. But that's just transparency. It's not changing the actual underlying costs. We also have a lot of places, you didn't ask me about this, you asked me for how to fix it, but there are a lot of places where we're taking a lot of steps backwards as a country. I'm not sure a lot of people know about, and I think it's really important for this room. There was a court case a couple of months ago that is taking away access to free preventive services that people across this country have come to rely on through their insurance. So that is screening for cancers, that is education or support and education for behavioral health for adults and for children. It's really important issues that are relating to pregnancy, including a lot that disproportionately impact women of color, like preeclampsia and gestational diabetes. We're taking a step backwards in a lot of places, and this is a court case that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention or don't know about. The United States Care is working very closely to make sure that while we make advances in insurance, people being insured, insurance that covers what we need, that we also don't take a lot of steps backwards on the screenings that will help us all in this room make sure we live longer lives. So the Braidwood case is something, if you haven't talked to your representatives about it, haven't talked to people in your state or your employer, that people need to make sure this is happening, because it should be the next Supreme Court case that we see that is taking away access to care that people in this room I know care so deeply about.
So is it a matter of talking to your representative? Is there something more that people can do? Because they don't know until it's time to do something about it for their own health, and then it's too late. So where's the rub? What can you do for your own self to prepare for this enormous problem that affects a lot of people.
Yeah, I'd say right now the courts need to fix this. It's a court case that has decided that political pressure is more important than doctors and physicians understanding what is right for the health of our country and for individual patients. So the courts need to fix this, and we hope that if it goes to the Supreme Court, that is the way it goes. But I think making sure your legislator and members of Congress know that this is happening, a lot of people don't, and making sure that they're raising the alarms to the Biden administration, to the Supreme Court, to make sure this doesn't go backwards is really important.
Shenard, what advice do you have for other patients, having been through this yourself? What do you want people in this room to know?
Well, first of all, the clinical that I am, the tumor that I had on my spinal cord is not there anymore.
Amazing, amazing.
The other two is still shrinking. But the legislature, they got to get up. They need, I applied for Medicaid, and I was approved. I called MDNs and I told them I got the Medicaid. They told me, well, we can't accept it because you're not a resident of Houston. So that was a waste of time. So basically, we need help. We really do. We got to wait for the insurance people to approve something, and the whole time the cancer is moving in us. So yes, I need help, and they need to do something about it.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're angry about it because you're seeing other people around you who are going through the same thing. Maria, talk to us about what you have seen. We've had conversations about this. It's been hard to get people to talk about it. We've gone to so many different people and we've met with brick walls. Can you talk about that journey? But then also, why won't people talk about it?
So I think one of the best ways to describe it is remember that MD Anderson, when it started, was a hospital for the criminally insane and cancer patients. So there is a stigma around cancer. And what we have found, especially in the community, often if somebody's older, they don't want to stress out their family members, so they don't tell their family members, and they will suffer in silence. Then there's just, what have I done? Kind of the personal abuse that people do to ourselves. What have I done to get this? And then there's also just the financial, when you know the shortcomings that you're coming, it's the humanity of it. And so it is really hard to get many people to talk about it, because they'll say, I won't talk because my daughter might hear. And so one is, and that also means they don't have hope. They don't want to talk because their loved one thinks they're gonna die. So education is really important. Also creating pathways. So like streamlining. It sounds so crazy. When we started the hub, we were like, get people into screening. Boom, got it. And that's what we started doing, get people into screening. Then we're like, even if we got people to the door to the screening, they're like, oh no, without a primary care physician referral, we can't screen you. Oh, what do you mean? Clearly I have breast. Why can't I get a mammogram? Whatever it is, I have a nose, I'm breathing, so I got a lung. Why can't I get the appropriate screening? And whether there's a doctor to say it or not, or just give me a doctor, have one right there, give me one. So it's streamlining. When we're asking people, especially when you're thinking about people who may be taking off work, who are experiencing some kind of difficulty. So now we're asking them, go to another appointment. Or even if they live rurally and they're having to travel to get to the doctor. We're asking people to do like these superhuman things for the basics. So there is some streamlining that needs to take place when it comes to screening. And also like the permissions. Why do I have to have a permission from this, and this if it's my body? One of the things that I took away that I knew that I forgot, that was pointed out earlier, is that your tissues are yours. Your test subjects are yours. So when the hospital's like, well, we have these 36 people, none of which you have met, none of which who think of you as a person, you're number 1662, when you're waiting for them to sign off so they can give your tissue sample to the genetic testing, why? That's some stuff they made up. So making sure that you take onus, that we learn advocacy. I always like to call them, instead of calling them caregivers, I call them your care advocate. Because when you're diagnosed with cancer, it's not your sharpest moment. It can't be. You're being told that your body is turning against itself and maybe trying to kill you. So at that point in time, now we're going to say, now you should be ready to advocate and go ask this person to run over all of this. It's not the most realistic plan. So I'm an advocate for streamlining, for making it, instead of having to demand it, making it the request of what it should be. You know, somebody shouldn't have to fight to get a mammogram. Somebody shouldn't have to fight to get a CT scan or to get any scan that may identify what is ailing them and keeping them from being the person or the contributing part of society that they want to be. So I'm really an advocate for streamlining and making sure that people can get into the screens, the tests, and even the follow-ups. You know, like I know there was an example with an insurance company where somebody needed a second opinion, and they're like, oh no, we've given you an opinion. We like our doc, so that's all. That's the only one we have on our list. So you're going to have to go with that, even if the doctor may not be the most competent, may not be the most culturally competent. We know that there is difference in how healthcare is delivered based on how you appear. So if you go to a doctor who doesn't like brown people, you know, or doesn't like who they perceive as poor, or doesn't want any more Medicaid or Medicare patients on their list, then how is that going to impact your care? They're going to say, well, like they told Shenard, you're high risk. High risk for what? I mean, for living? I mean, I don't even know what the high risk was. Was it high risk for living or something else? Let's make it streamlined. Like somebody shouldn't have to do all these backflips just to live.
Right. Dr. Clemens, let me ask you, as you know, as an ambassador and doing what you do in the community for the Lazarex Cancer Wellness Hub, what do you need more of in the community to serve the patients that you serve? And you know, we talk about a medical home, and if patients don't have the right insurance, they don't have a medical home. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about what you need more of, and in relation to that medical home?
So what we need is funding and resources. So So as explained here, you have, where we do work in the trenches. We are working with people who are hopeless. They're seeing people around them every day dying from cancer. They're afraid of cancer itself. They're afraid of being diagnosed with cancer or being screened for cancer. They're afraid of the cost, or they don't understand the cost. They don't understand what their insurance pays for and what it doesn't pay for. They don't understand what insurance is sometimes altogether. So what we do is we try to get them educated. We try to provide them with resources. But the limitation of what we need is funding and resources for them, because it's one thing to educate them. It's one thing to explain to them the significance of screening and clinical trials and treatment, but once we get them to understand and acknowledge and agree to it, now what do? And then we have situations where we have individuals who come to us they have insurance, but they don't have a doctor. And if because they don't have a doctor, we can't get them to the specialist for their either cancer treatment or to follow them. So it's nice to have a place to send them because we know where we want to send them. But if they don't have the foundational resources for what they need, then it's pointless for us to even have a conversation with them, because we're supposed to be the hope for them. Like we say, we give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. We need the resources to be that for them. Mm-hmm. So that's what we need, funding and resources.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll spread that out onto the internet and make sure that people hear that loud and clear. Mm-hmm. Natalie, and I do want to invite people to come up to ask questions as we close out this panel. The microphone's up there, and please send your questions in via the live stream. But Natalie, I'd like to ask you, as people come up with their questions, what you have learned about how payers can meet patients where they are, and where could insurance maybe be more nimble in how they deliver care?
A lot of places. It could be a lot more nimble. I think the way that we need to start continue to tackle systemic change and thinking about insurers is first making sure that they do what I know Lazarex is good at, that what we're good at is listening to people and hearing the stories of how their policies have caused people to not get the care they need, to not save the lives that should have been saved. And really understand the impact of different policies and how that impacts the health of our country and of individuals. There's a lot of work I think that can be done in wonky terms of value-based care, which is how we make sure that health systems and providers, insurers are aligned to give care that people need, and they're paid accordingly if there are better outcomes, if there are ways that people have a medical home and that they're able to get the better care that they need, the treatment that they need. So I think there's a lot of work that Congress can do, that the administration has done over a decade in a very bipartisan way to make sure that models of how we pay for care differently incentivize providers and incentivize insurers to give the care that people need. But I do think it all has to get back to people and understanding people's stories and understanding communities and the work that you're doing, that you all are doing to make sure that that's rooted in truth and in data on equity, and that they are putting forward the work that we can do to better outcomes. And I think that's going to come with a lot of through levers of policy change and payment change to make sure that happens.
Yeah, excellent. Dr. Sandoval, Fabian Sandoval.
Hi, good afternoon. First of all, let me tell you, sir, that I'm currently conducting a lot of clinical trials in my office, and I'm using your HPV COVID vaccine in one of our trials, and it is fantastic. So thank you so much for that work that you've done for our communities. So the topics here says, is your insurance putting your health at higher risk? My patients don't have insurance. My clinical research patients don't have insurance. I serve probably 95% of the patients that come through my office are Hispanic patients. Our office is in DC. I have offices in DC, in Northern Virginia. We just have opened up in Humboldt Park in Chicago. We're working with the FQHC here in DC, but they don't have insurance. How do I help these patients that have no insurance when it comes to a treatment option? So, well, it's, do you want no insurance or some insurance? Help me figure out, what do I say to my patients when I say, listen, you're diagnosed and I see your white cells are super high. My current therapeutic areas are in these particular areas of clinical trials. I don't do oncology for that particular reason, but I have found several incidental findings when we're doing labs. I had a woman that came in for an obesity study. It turns out she was pregnant. She wasn't pregnant, but her hormone level was sky high. Turns out she had a tumor in her ovary, right? Thank goodness she came for an obesity study. I had to refer her out, but how can I work with these patients? What are your suggestions for someone like me and the hundreds of other providers that do clinical trials that don't have patients with insurance? And I'm looking at you, Ms. Davis, because I think you might have an answer for me.
I really wish I did. I mean, what do you do now?
Beg and plead any hospital that I can find,
Yeah.
right? But
I mean,
that is
you
not
guys
the
probably
right
have better-
answer. I mean,
yeah.
that is, I cross my fingers and I stay away from oncology for that reason, because they're hard. And when it happens, I need to give these people an answer. We also support the Mexican consulate, consulates of Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras, Peru. Today, I actually met with the Secretary of Health for Mexico, and I brought up Lazarex, saying, here in the U.S., we have this option where we can provide, and I told them the wonders to the Secretary of Health of Mexico, because they don't have that. Mexico does support us by giving information, by giving us funds to support those individuals here by giving them outreach and education, but that's it. We're stuck. So this is another area where you may have insurance, but what about those that don't have insurance? What are we going to do then?
Yeah, you guys have better answers.
I will say one thing. Many of the FQHCs, especially the ones that are teaching and have agreements that are established with cancer care centers. So although I believe that if a person was lucky enough to have you as their doctor, they probably don't want to leave your care, but it may be partnering and creating these pathways directly with the cancer care centers, especially the centers of excellence in other places, because they may have programs, but the thing is that they don't advertise that they have these programs. So going by, unfortunately, it's what cancer they have and whatever. They may have opportunities, but they also create partnerships with FQHCs that say, at least we won't charge you this much. And then going to the further to the actual centers sometimes can get people into care when they don't have any. Like Chenard's case, sometimes it is making sure that they get enrolled. We didn't know how many of our community members we were going to have to work at getting enrolled in Medicare or Medicaid so that they could get even screens, much less care.
Those are documented individuals. I also have undocumented.
But FQHC serve everyone. So the federally qualified healthcare system, it's called a safety net for a reason. They provide care for everyone regardless of what their documentation is. So starting with if the FQHC, my hope, and I may be naive, and I'm willing to admit that, but my hope is with FQHCs, at least the ones that I have worked with, they've had relationships with some cancer care centers, and because they're going through the FQHC, they can get the care, uncompensated care, that way working with the FQHC. But like I said, I could be a little bit in denial at the greatness of FQHCs.
I work with an FQHC right now, and actually one of our investigators is the CEO of the FQHC, who used to be in charge of women's health, and he's been promoted and he stayed a principal investigator in what we do, and he's a big advocate of that, and we do try to do that type of work, but it's very hard.
It is very hard, and not all FQHCs are created equal. So some of them have the ability to negotiate and leverage their presence in a community to then be able to encourage these healthcare centers and cancer centers of excellence to provide care. Not all of them are that big or have that portion of the community that they're then encouraged to do so. But certainly it is one of the only routes that I can think of, besides, I think, that was mentioned, which was beg, borrow, and steal. So that's the other thing.
There are policies in states. We're working in one in Colorado. I'm not going to tell you that the coverage, I don't know what the coverage would do for a clinical trial, but there are movements in states to allow for people without documentation to enroll in state-based coverage. Again, I don't know what that would do for the clinical trials, but I know there are a lot of states that are looking into making sure that people can enroll without thinking about, without the documentation status. Colorado is just one that we were a part of.
Thank you, Dr. Sandoval. Appreciate it. We have a question from our live stream. This is from William Cheney. What organizations can I collaborate with to be a healthcare advocate and to streamline the system? Are there organizations out there that, Natalie, Dr. Clemens, maybe Maria, that you all see that, and Chenard, maybe that you've come across, that are addressing this issue, that are helping maybe to solve this? That says a lot.
Well, of course, Lazarex.
Well,
we build bridges to help that. I would say that there are several. There's a network. So luckily, we believe wholeheartedly in that there's enough. Right? So there's an organization, there's many organizations that I could throw out or that I could, suggest that help get people into care in one of many ways. Some of them are cancer specific, like, the Lung Association, Lung Cancer Association, they focus on lung cancer. But then there's ones like, and I feel like if I mention one, I feel like I have to mention them all, so that's what I'm struggling with in my mind.
Oh, yes.
So, but I will say that there, certainly you can get in touch with the hubs and they can give it to you, but there's ones like the Patient Empowerment Network that can help people navigate and find some of them, and they help navigate. I know that there is the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, which has something blue. I can't remember it, but they have a whole program to help people navigate and find care. There's also the Immerman Angels, that is a peer-to-peer referral. So sometimes it's about me talking to somebody who's gone through before me. Mm-hmm. We're not recreating wheels here. Yeah. That's not what we want to do. If somebody's rolled over that path before, there's somebody who can help guide you. So that's kind of what Immerman Angels does. And there's also, ultimately, there is the opportunity to create defined pathways. I say ask the question. The worst thing they can tell you is no. And so when you're fighting to get your cancer addressed, you ask everybody.
And I can add to that because part of my responsibility as a cancer care companion is to do the legwork for people who are looking for resources. So when at the Lazarex Cancer Wellness Hub, if somebody is struggling with trying to find somewhere or what to do, I can be that person for them. I can be that advocate for them.
Yeah, and I would say to the questioner, figuring out what issue matters the most to you and seeing if the organization out there that has a great patient advocacy arm. I'm on the board of the Preeclampsia Foundation, and their Mama's Voices program is amazing. And so, finding the issue area and seeing if there's a place that, has that patient advocacy. At United States of Care, we have we call it Voices of Real Life, and they're people that share their everyday story with us and want to be a part of the solution tables where we bring together policymakers, insurers, all parts of the healthcare system and patients to say, how do we tackle this problem? How do we bring a lens of equity and make this issue work? But it's rooted in what we hear from people and their experiences. So I think it's finding your passion area and finding an organization or a community group or individual who can, you can be a part of advocating for change.
Very helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Your list, I mentioned NORD earlier.
Yeah.
Which is huge. They're based here in Washington. There's also another group called the EverLife Foundation that does a lot of advocacy and support. And Lazarus is a member of the Sarcoma Coalition. And we're a group, we are also members, and we're a group of 30 organizations, 30 plus, because I think there's even more than 30, that are part of this organizations that represent sarcomas. So I just wanted to throw out a few more resources.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you for the information. So enlightening. Appreciate all of your perspectives. And it's been just, shining such an important light on this topic is we need it, and we need to have more discussions, and this is just the beginning. So thank you all for being with us. Maria, Chenard, Natalie, Dr. Clemens, thank you so much. About to wrap up, but I want to get to a couple quick little things. One big thing, actually a few big things, but I'll be quick. Since 2017, Lazarex has supported nearly 10,000 patients from all 50 states, helping them get to and from potentially life-saving treatments through clinical trials. Before we go tonight, we want to share the story of one of those very important patients. There are many challenges along the cancer journey, and this patient has used her voice to inspire and to educate. When Megan McKee was 30 years old, she was living a dream life, but she was having some health problems, and so she went to a doctor. She was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive pediatric cancer and was told she had 3 years to live. In the 3 years since, Megan has been through 2 clinical trials. Her friends started a GoFundMe to help her get to the first one, which required travel from New Jersey to California. And Lazarex is now providing assistance to get to her current clinical trial. Through her painful and very challenging journey, Megan, who is now 33, writes a blog called A Life Well Lived about the challenges that she faces. Her intention through this blog is to educate people about the realities of a cancer diagnosis and how the healthcare industry makes being sick harder than it really is, than it already is. Megan can't be with us tonight, but she is watching on our live stream, and we are wishing you well, Megan. And for your work in shining a beacon of light on why Lazarex is working to disrupt the system, we are honoring you with our very first Beacon of Light Award. We thank you for inspiring change and hope, and we thank you for joining us tonight to accept this award. We have sent the award to Megan, and we know that she has accepted it. So thank you for being an inspiration to us all, Megan. And finally, yes. And finally, a quick bit of exciting news. At the 2020 Disrupting the System Health and Wellness educator Glenn Ellis, you may know him, he's awesome. He brought to our attention the lack of diverse characters in children's books that inspire kids to become medical doctors. And as a result, Lazarex collaborated with author Carmen Bogan, and Willis Watson the Wannabe will be released next year. So we just received the book cover illustration, and we will share it with all of you in the days to come. It'll be on Lazarex.com. metadata.org. Also, Lazarex is making policy progress. You heard a little bit about it in the first fireside chat toward equitable access with legislation now in 6 states, Georgia being the most recent. Next on the list, Florida, New York, Ohio, Montana, and Maryland. So please stay tuned as we disrupt state by state to get patients the care that they need. And that concludes our 6th annual Disrupting the System. Thank you again to our sponsor, incredible partner, Metadata, to our panelists, our disruptors, our awardees. Thank you for being here. Your engagement and commitment to disrupt the system does make a difference. Little by little, we are getting it done. Please stay engaged with us. Let us know what you think by reaching out on social media at LazarexCF and at Metadata. And when you post, use the hashtag LazarexDTS. That social media is so important. You can find out more about Lazarex at lazarex.org and Metadata at metadata.com. For those of you who are in the room with us, the main entrance at Rayburn closed at 6:30, but we do have amazing interns who are going to join you and escort you out via the adjacent Longworth building. There is food in the back. There are drinks on the deck, so please feel free to enjoy, or you can have a great night. Thank you so much again for being here.